Block Gemara. Today's daf is daf Samach Beis, and there are a lot of pictures here in the Rashbam, but no one should be daunted by it. We're learning about the intentions of a person selling something, and he he puts down the boundaries, and sometimes a little bit enigmatic. And the question is, what did he mean? Or it's a bit nebulous. What exactly does it mean? So we're up to the following case. Towards the bottom of the page, Meitzah Reuven, about 5 lines from the bottom of the page. So what happens in the following scenario? Meitzah Reuven is Mizrach Umaydiv. Reuven has a boundary on the east and the west. And Meitzah Shimon is Tzofan V'Darim. And Shimon's boundary is north and south. If you look in the picture, not the very bottom of the page, but towards the bottom of the page, you'll see Reuven is on the top of the field and the bottom of the field, and Shimon is on the two sides of the field. And if he wants to sell the entire land, which is in between all of those fields, these are all fields that are neighboring to the field that you want to sell. If you want to sell the entire field, then the way to do that is, to be clear, is Meitzar Reuven Ruchin Train. Reuven's field border it on two sides, or Meitzar Shimon Ruchin Train. And so to Shimon's field, border it on two sides. Because if you only mention this is a field between Reuven and Shimon's field, then all you have to do is give a cut the field diagonally, and the top will be Reuven, and the right will be Shimon, and that's it. You want to give him the entire field that's in between Reuven's field and Shimon's field. So then you have to spell out Shtei Ruches and of Reuven and Shtei Ruches of Shimon. Then it's clear. Or he writes even clearer that Reuven is Mizrach and Reuven is Maidiv and Shimon is Tzofan and Shimon is Darim. Then obviously there's no ambiguities. Now we have a few questions. How do we interpret the following shtaris? And obviously there's a dispute afterwards what he bought. And again, the question always comes up, why don't we just look how much he paid and we'll say that's what it is. So either because we paskin like the Chachamim, we said yesterday that Hadamim are not Mardin, they don't reveal to us anything, or because when it comes to Karka, the Gemara talks about animals. When it comes to Karka, there's no cheating by Karka, like the Rashbam said. Iboilu have a question. What happens if CM like Kronis? So example, he only mentioned the corners. And he mentioned all the corners. There were lots of fields all around, a lot of neighbors all around the field. You're selling a very large expanse of land, and you have your neighbors are manifold. So what do you do? So all you did was you wrote the corners. You wanted to know where the extremities are, where each direction ends. So you write, the top right-hand corner borders on Reuben's field, the top left-hand corner borders on Shimon's field, the bottom left-hand corner is Yehuda, and the bottom right-hand corner is Levi. The question is, what did you sell? Did you sell the entire expanse of the land in between the whole area? You make imaginary lines, make a square, or you only meant the corners and you give them two diagonals, like the picture here on the right-hand side, the bottom of the bomb. You see those two diagonals. That's all you get. You get the corners, the diagonals. That's it. What did he mean by that? That's question number one. So he boiled CM Leisa Kronis. How do we interpret when he gave him only the corners? Mao, how do we interpret that? So do we say that it's not normal to sell just two diagonals? He probably sold everything in between, or because he only highlighted the corners, then maybe that's all he wanted you to get. Is that like there's an X? That's question number one. Question number two. Kamin gam. A gam is like the long chaf. So like a dalid, and this is what you mentioned. So you mentioned a little bit of the boundary. You didn't only mention the corners. You mentioned a little bit of the north, a little bit of the south, a little bit of the east, a little bit of the west. So you did start mentions a bit more than the previous one. So even if you learn the previous one, all you get is the corners, but because you didn't mention at all any of the sides. Here you're mentioning a little bit of the side. It's a gam. It's like a fine level chaf. So you mentioned a little bit of the top north and a little bit of the west over there, bordered by Reuven, and so on and so forth. What happens in this case here? Do we say that because he started talking about the boundaries, he's giving him more than just the corners, he's giving him the entire field? Or do we say because he only mentioned the boundary, didn't mention the entire boundary, then he gets also just the diagonals, but a bit wider than the other one? Look at the picture here, the bottom left-hand corner. of Rashbam. So you see here, he mentioned those corners there, right? The two corners are two opposite ends. So he mentioned a little bit of the boundary. And then the question is, does he get the entire field? Or does he get just a one diagonal? Because he only mentioned one, one corner, but he described each corner on, a bit of the north, a bit of the south, because that neighbor is covered a bit there. So what does he get? What do he mean by that? Next one is Bisirugin Mao. What happens in a case where you have 8 neighbors, 2 in the top, 2 in the bottom, north, and 2 in the south, and 2 in the east, 2 in the west, and you only mention one neighbor on each side, but they're not contiguous. They're not touching each other. How do we understand that? You're too lazy to write all the 8 names, but since nobody really sells a field, like the way one corner top right, and then he jumps to the left, and then jumps to the bottom. So therefore, he meant the entire field. Or we say no. Since he did nominate a few names, maybe he meant only that. If you look at the picture here, did he sell the entire field, or do we say he sold, one section of Reuben, then he jump over to one section of Levi, then he jump over one section of Yisachar? You get four triangles, or not? How do we understand that? Tekun. All these questions is tekun. We can't ask the person either he died and says Yoshin, or and we're having a dispute now. Well, there's just a dispute. What actually he meant? What happened in the following case? He nominated the 3 sides. He said east you're bordering on this property, north you're bordering on this property, west you're bordering on this property, but south he didn't mention. He didn't mention the south side. He did not mention the south side. How do we interpret that? So we have 3 opinions. Rav says, that 4th boundary, there's a furrow there, there's a row growing there. Obviously, he omitted the 4th boundary to say he meant to say you're getting till the 4th boundary, not including the 4th boundary, and therefore you get everything but that last row, which the last row is the 4th boundary. You don't get that. That's why he omitted it. Shmuel said no. He didn't bother writing the 4th boundary, but since he gave the other 3, he definitely wanted to sell him the entire property. And Rav Asi says the fact that he omitted the 4th boundary means he wants to hold something back. So and since he did not clearly say I'm selling you the entire field in between the 3 boundaries on top, even all he was selling was the line, the furrows that go along these 3 boundaries. He doesn't even get the entire field. He only gets a line like this. Once he hold back, and he didn't specify what he is giving, we say he holds back as much as he can. You only get 1 row along those 3 lines. Why? On the one hand, he holds like Rav the fact that he omitted the 4th side because you're holding it back. Once you hold that back, you hold everything back. Omar Rava comes along Rava and says, I hold like Rav, but I'm going to make I'm going to make a qualification. And there are 2 opinions as to what the qualification of Rava is. Omar Rava says Rava. Hilchas, the halacha is kona hakoil. The halacha is you are koine everything, like Rav says. Chutz b'meitzelevi, exactly like Rav, except the bottom row. But now, there's 2 possibilities of the bottom row. One possibility of the bottom row is that the bottom row is inside the 3 boundaries. It's called muvla. It's inside the 3 boundaries. There's another possibility that the boundaries are actually longer than the field that you are selling. So the fourth boundary, that row, which is the 4th boundary, is outside of the field, is outside of the boundaries. So therefore, it's loy muvla. It's not necessary that the field goes a bit further. The boundaries end over, a bit higher up, but the field goes down a little bit low, and that's where that last row is. That's part of this field. But so it's loy muvla. Now, when Rav said that you don't get the 4th boundary, is he talking about the case that's loy muvla because this is the field that sort of goes beyond the boundaries on the side? It's loy muvla. That's why, since he omitted it, that's what he meant was I don't want to include that in the field. I'm only including what's inside the 3 pasikin, the three sides, the 3 boundaries. Or even if it's muvla, you don't get it because it's the fact that he omitted the 4th side. You don't get it. Now, the minimum size of a field is 9 kavin. We actually had that in the mission of Yud Aleph, and that's a general rule, that the size of a field is that you can have a yield of 9 kavin. Small little tract of land, that's considered a field. So that's another variable. What happens if this particular line, the 4th boundary, which you omitted, can carry that fourth boundary that you emitted can grow 9 kavin. So it's a significant field in its own right. Is that why we say it was omitted, or it makes no difference, even if it's less than 9 kavin? The fact that you omitted it means you wanted to leave it out. How do we understand that? Or if you have a cluster of palm trees, usually that's like a boundary. You have a cluster of palm trees, so therefore, or that's enough. That's a significant field in its own right. That's when we say it's not included. Or even if you have no palm trees growing, it's not included. So these are the different variables that we are going to discuss. Comes along Rav and says, I agree with Rav 100%, but let me delineate a bit further. And it goes as follows. When do we say it's not included? Mivla. When do we say it's not included? Is only if it's not included in the two boundaries on the sides, and it is not included inside. It goes beyond the boundaries. Mivla, but if it would be included in the side, if you look at the diagrams in the Rashbam, you'll see. But if it's movable, if it's included in those two side boundaries, then Connor, then it's part of the field, even though he omitted that fourth boundary. Now it goes further. Even when we say it's not included, why? Because it's outside of the two boundaries. That's only talking about if it's a significant patch on its own. For example, it has a cluster of palm trees, or tisha kabin, or it's a big enough piece of land that you can give a yield of 9 kabin. Fine. It doesn't have that significant cluster of palm trees. It's not big enough to plant and grow 9 kabin. Then it gets schlepped in, it gets dragged along with the rest of the field. Mechlal, so we can infer from this. What about the chimuvla? What about if it would be included in the two sides? And even had a cluster of palm trees, even though it would be chashuv. I felt even though it might have it's a large enough tract to have a yield of 9 kabin. Since it's inside, it's included in the two side boundaries, even though he omitted it, so the first opinion says the only time that it's not, the only time when definitely we say that it's not included in the field is if it's outside of the two boundaries. That's why you omitted it, and it is significant. In other words, either it has a cluster of palm trees on it, or it's large enough to have 9 kavin, a yield of 9 kavin. That's opinion number one. So he's being very maker on behalf of the buyer that the field gets dragged along, even though he admitted it. However, the Ikadami says the other way around. We're going to benefit the vendor. Omar Rava. Rava says the same thing. You're coining the entire field, that field makes a V. When do we say that you're coining the fourth side? Ela de mivla. Only if it's inside. If it's a swallow inside, it comes along the field. No, that's the same thing we said before. But another thing. If it's not swallowed, if it's not included inside the two boundaries, you're not coining. Fine. But this is where everything changes. The chi mivla. Even when it's included in the boundaries, do you know when it's considered part of the field? Remember, he omitted the fourth side. There's a conscious decision to omit the fourth side. Even if it's included in the boundaries, sometimes he'll hold it back for himself. When? When do we say it's included if it's insignificant? It does not have that cluster of trees, that patch of trees. It teaches cabin order that it can grow the 9 cabin. Is a cluster of trees, or cabin like even though it's included in the side boundaries, if it's a significant patch and you omitted the fourth side, it's not included. Mechlal, so we can infer. So that's already one difference between this opinion and the previous opinion. Then another difference. In the previous opinion, if it's outside of the lines, it's never included. Here, it depends if it's significant, insignificant. Mechlal, if it's not movable. If it's not muvla, then you never kind it. Before we said that if it's not muvla, right. Before we said that if it's not muvla, then only if it's chashiv. It has to be not muvla. It has to be outside of the perimeter, and it does not have this patch of palm trees. Doesn't have 9 kavin, so it has to have two variables to say that's not included. It's outside of the mitzorim, outside of the boundaries. Plus, it doesn't have anything chashuv there. Then we say, okay, it's not included. Anything else, even if it's outside, but if it's, for example, if it's not chashuv, it will be dragged along with it. Okay, so that's the first opinion. My Shank, according to the second opinion, if it's outside of the parameter of the boundaries, I don't care, choshev, not choshev. If it's outside, it's outside. It's not part of the deal. Says the Gemara. So now, what's the conclusion? The Gemara says as follows. So there's common ground between these two opinions, and then there's a dispute, and therefore we're going to make the following interesting psak halach. It goes as follows. What we learn from both Lashonos of Rava is the besada in the field, the field itself, we pass like Rav, you get the entire field. Entire field is sold. The only question is that boundary, the bottom boundary that you missed out. We also learn out the heicha the mivla if the field is inside the boundaries, and the lekole richa there's nothing significant on it, no patch of palm trees. Below have it is a cabin, then kana. Everyone agrees that if it's inside and it's insignificant, it's part of the field. Kind of. Everyone agrees also if loy mivla, if it's outside of the boundaries and it is significant, the ikole richa dikla habit is a cabin significant, loy kana. It's on its own and it's not kind of. Where we have a dispute between the two versions is what about mivla if it's included in the parameters, but the ika aleh, but it's included, but it's significant in its own right. What happens then? Is it in part of the field or not? Or lay mivla, it's not included, but veleka aleh, there's nothing significant about it. Because according to one opinion, if even though it's outside of the boundaries, if it's insignificant, it automatically gets dragged along. We have two opinions in the Gemara. One opinion says one way, one opinion says another way. Therefore, what do we do? Shuda the diner. What we do is Shuda the diner, which is a concept we already mentioned a few times, which is the Bezin throws at it. According to Rabbeinu Tam, Bezin just at its whim can paskin what they want, and if for whatever reason they reverse, they can live. If they have to look at it again, they can paskin differently because there's no rhyme and reason. According to other Rishonim, Rashi, Bezin has to assess what's in the mind of that person, what they think the fairest thing to do is, and have to have a reason and understand why they make this rule. Now, what's interesting is the general rule is whenever we have a strike at the dinner, what we do is either we say Hamaitzi Mechavera Olavaraya, that you have that whatever it is you follow Hamaitzi Olavaraya, and the other opinion or we say Safik Mamin Yecholkin. Never say Shudadaina. How come over here we say Shudadaina? Because over here the Rishonim say this is not part of the Gemara. It's actually Rabbanos Furoy, which is very, very seldom. We have the beginning of Gemara Kedushin of Beis over there with the Rishonim Ritva and others say that it's Rabbanos Furoy. We have a few places. Subas of Beis and Beis faces say Rabbachoy in the Gemara. There is not the Gemara Rabbachoy, but it's Rabbanos Furoy or the Goinim. And so on. Here they say Yudoy going in the name of Rabbanos Furoy. Because this din we can't learn anywhere else, because we have a klal always. Here they came along and they paskin that we should say Shudra Daina. And according to some Rishonim, what is the Shudra Daina? See how much he paid. Adam and and that should be part of the Shudra Daina. Even though we said halacha is not like Adam and but here it might be different. Okay, let's just continue digging. Why might be different? Because here definitely the sale was a sale. The question is only how much. When we talk about Dam and Medina, the question is what did he buy? Did he buy this? Did he buy that? Did he buy this at all? Says he might have further. The guy says Pauga the Eastly Bada. That two partners have a land. If he says Pauga the Eastly Bada, the half that I have on the land, then what he's saying? The half that I own, Pauga. I'm giving it to you. Pauga ba'ara the Eastly, but if he says half the land that is mine, that means half of what I own, which means you're getting a quarter of the land, is riva. If he says half of what I have in the land, I have half, and I'm giving you that entire half. But if he says half of the land that I own, so I'm giving you half of what I own. I own half the land only, so you're getting a quarter. I don't see the difference. Ishtik. He kept quiet. I thought that he accepted it. I saw him fetish. Hani started, there were different starters. The nothing with Bear because it says Hachi Palgo DC Bara Palga. It says exactly that. If he says half of what I own in the land, then you get half. Palga Bara DC, but half of the land that I own, you get a quarter. He didn't say, so how come Rabbi didn't bother answering like we said discussed yesterday, Rabbi, we said, because this is Talmud. That's what the Rishonim say, which is a bit odd as you see the next piece in the Gemara. Rabba says, made said, if I say, made said Ara, the boundary of the land, the Minah, he says, the boundary of the land, the Minah, Pligi, Palga, I'm going to give you half, then Palga. Then you get half. He says, made said Ara, the Minah, Psika. He uses the word Psika, I'm going to cut you off a part, doesn't mean I'm going to give you half of what I have, is Tes Kabit. What's a chosh of a part? 9 Kabit, that's what I'm giving you. Only by Mashnahacha, Mashnahacha. Ishtiku is quiet. He's quiet. And here we say that the Rabbi was made to Abaya. Interesting to understand why we decided that here Rabbi was made. Why a minute ago we said that Rabbi just ignored him. And here we decided that the Rabbi agrees to Abaya. The Gemara now is going to say, and what exactly did Abaya mean? So we thought that what whichever Lashon used Psika Pauga, he meant literally half. It's not that. The Amar Rabbi Yemar Shama, the demon fashion by Einzabaya, they makes it out of the meaning of Pauga. Whether you use the word, I'm going to give you a piece, and you use the word Pauga, which usually means.
Half of that.
Yeah, but usually Pauga means the word Pauga means half. Well, they makes it out of the meaning of Psika. Amale depends. It makes no difference in which word he uses, Pliga, or he uses the word Psika. It's the same amount. But what doesn't depend on is the following. Amale, if he said to him. I'm giving you half of whatever I have. He adds again, and these are the boundaries, Pauga half. Then he gets half. Why? Because according to most Rishonim, it's superfluous. He already said, I'm selling you this, part of it. Why does he repeat again? These are the boundaries. Because he's adding anything extra in the star, he's trying to add something. That means he wants to give you half. If he didn't say that, then Tisha Kabin. Then you go back to the minimum size of a field, which is 9 Kabin. Which is 9 Kabin. Says the Gemara, Pshita, this finishes this whole story. Pshita, Amar, he says, Yachlik Ploini bin Chasai, I want to, this person who's dying. Or Stam, he's distributing his estate. And he says, that person, I want to have a share in my estate. If he says, Yachlik Ploini bin Chasai, Pauga, when he says, I want to share with him this, the share means half. If he says, give him, you know what you Yachlik, let's divide. He says, give him a piece. How much? Time we learned now, according to the Rif, he says this Gemara has no logic to it, so therefore we're going to limit it only to this Gemara here, the following din. If someone says, but the Rashbam gives an interesting logic to all this, and there's a lot of shayim agree with the Rashbam. If someone says, we're talking about a cistern with water, and he says to him, give him a chelik. Now, we don't know if a chelik means give him half, or mean give him the minimum amount. Now, if you say give a water in a boil, so we say, actually this is a long piece, so maybe we'll do this tomorrow. Okay, have a good day. We'll see you tomorrow, Mitzvah.